I, 24M, grew up in what seemed like a normal middle-class household in the suburbs, but my parents' behavior has been a constant source of pain throughout my life. They built their entire reputation in our community around being these amazing people who adopted a little girl and loved her even more than their biological son. Not many people know the full story of how this affected me. When I was 6 years old, my parents brought home Emma, 21F, my adopted sister, and everything in my life changed after that day. The day my parents sat me down in our living room to tell me about possibly adopting a sister, I couldn't contain my excitement. I spent most of my afternoons alone in our backyard, making up games and waiting for my parents to come home from work. I didn't have any siblings to play with, and the neighborhood kids were all either much older or younger than me. The idea of having a sister to share my toys with and someone to keep me company during those long afternoons felt like the perfect solution. When Emma first arrived, it was exactly what I hoped for. We played together, shared snacks, and I finally had someone to talk to during those quiet afternoons at home. The changes in my family started small but kept building up over time. My parents began focusing all their attention on Emma, making every decision based on what was best for her. They would cancel our weekend family activities if Emma wasn't in the mood, change dinner plans to match her preferences, and adjust their schedules to attend all her school events while missing mine. I started feeling pushed aside in my own home, like I was becoming invisible to my own parents. I know people might think I'm just jealous, but there's more to this story than simple sibling rivalry. The contrast in how my parents handled childcare for Emma versus me was pretty different. Within a week of Emma's arrival, my mom submitted her resignation letter at the accounting firm where she'd worked for 8 years to become a full-time mom. This was completely different from when I was born. Mom went back to her office job as soon as her maternity leave ended, leaving me with different caregivers. My parents were always stressed about money back then, working overtime and weekend shifts, which meant I spent most of my time either at my grandparents' small apartment or with whatever teenage babysitter they could afford that month. The babysitting situation was far from ideal. These girls, usually high school students trying to earn extra cash, treated their job as a chance to hang out with their boyfriends rather than actually watching me. I'd spend hours alone in my room while they sat in the living room texting or talking on their phones. Sometimes their boyfriends would climb through our back window or sneak in through the garage door when they thought I was asleep. I kept telling my parents about these incidents, and they'd fire the current sitter only to hire another one who acted the same way. This cycle continued for years, and I spent most of my early childhood feeling like nobody really cared about my well-being. When Emma came, it seemed like it would change everything for the better. Despite being only 6, I took my role as a big brother immediately. I shared all my toys with her, and even helped her learn the alphabet. At least whatever I could do at the age of 6 I did. Having my mom at home full-time seemed like an added bonus. I thought we'd finally get to do all the things I'd watched other kids do with their moms, like baking cookies or going to the park. Instead, my mom devoted all her time and attention to Emma, treating her like a princess while expecting me to be mature and independent because I was the big brother. Things really started to get complicated when my parents decided to change my birthday arrangements. Emma had been found abandoned at a shopping mall, and the orphanage had no records of her actual birth date. The doctors ran various tests, physical examinations, dental checks, development assessments, and estimated she was around 3 years old when she was found. Instead of keeping her assigned date from the orphanage or choosing any other day from the entire calendar year, my parents decided that Emma should share my birthday. They presented this idea like it was some sort of special honor for me. Those early joint birthday celebrations were bearable, but I started noticing subtle changes each year. While I still received presents and had some cake, the parties became increasingly focused on Emma. Relatives and family friends would arrive with twice as many gifts for her, cooing over how special it was that we celebrated together while barely acknowledging my presence. Everyone seemed fascinated by Emma's background story, treating her like a queen rather than just another kid. Meanwhile, I sat there opening my presents quietly, trying not to feel invisible at my own birthday party as people crowded around Emma to hear her retell the same adoption story they'd heard dozens of times before. My parents' decision to make Emma share my birthday still bothers me when I think about it. The orphanage had already given her an official date, the day she was found. We also had my grandparents' anniversary in March, my aunt's birthday in September, or literally any other day that could have become Emma's special date. But my parents specifically chose my birthday, claiming it would make Emma feel more connected to the family. For most kids, a birthday is the one day of the year that feels magical and be the center of attention. But my parents turned this simple childhood joy into another reminder that Emma's needs always came first. They wrapped up this decision in pretty words about family bonds and sharing, making it impossible for a 6-year-old to express any disappointment without feeling selfish. My uncle was the only one who seemed to notice something was wrong, pulling me aside during that first shared party to ask if I was really okay with all this. By age 10, Birthdays had become something I dreaded instead of celebrated. Emma controlled every aspect of our joint celebrations, from choosing the cake that I didn't even like, to picking princess themes that made me feel out of place at my own party. The guest list situation was particularly unfair. Emma would fill our house with 20 or more friends from her various activities, while I was strictly limited to inviting just 5 of mine. This rule meant I had to carefully choose between my friends each year, sometimes damaging relationships with those who couldn't come. My best friend stopped talking to me for weeks after I couldn't invite him to my 11th birthday. The inequality of these celebrations became even more obvious when I asked to invite my friend as a 6th guest one year. My parents immediately shut down the request, saying we'd already reached the maximum number of guests our house could accommodate. Yet somehow, there was always room for Emma's friends and their mothers, who apparently needed to supervise their daughters at all times. When I pointed out that my friends came alone, my parents dismissed my concerns with their standard excuse about girls needing more supervision. Meanwhile, Emma's friends and their moms took over our entire living room, treating me like I was just another guest at what was supposed to be my birthday too. I gathered up the courage several times to suggest having separate parties. Each attempt ended the same way. My parents would shut me down with their well-rehearsed responses about Emma's difficult past. They'd remind me how she didn't know her real birthday, as if that somehow justified taking over mine. Or they'd bring up her tough start in life for the 100th time, completely ignoring that they were giving her a tough present by constantly dismissing my feelings. These conversations always left me feeling guilty for even bringing up the subject, like I was somehow being selfish for wanting one day to myself. Eventually, I stopped fighting for my birthday. I learned to put on a smile and play my assigned role in what had become Emma's special day, featuring her brother. The hurt didn't go away, it just became a familiar feeling that surfaced every birthday. During these parties, I'd sit quietly in the corner while Emma opened twice as many presents as me, trying to look happy as relatives fawned over her and barely noticed my existence. The one bright spot in all this was discovering my love for creating things with my hands. It started small, turning an empty cereal box into a pencil holder one boring afternoon. Soon I was transforming all sorts of household items into art pieces. Our garage became my go-to place, filled with bins of collected materials, old newspapers, plastic bottles, broken jewelry, anything I could repurpose. I spent hours watching DIY videos, learning new techniques for making everything from decorative wall hangings to intricate jewelry pieces. My room slowly filled with my creations. This was something that belonged entirely to me, something Emma couldn't share or take over. What started as a therapeutic hobby in my teens had grown into a successful online business by my early 20s. I spent countless nights perfecting product photos, writing descriptions, and managing my online shop while working a day job at a local coffee shop. My handmade items started gaining attention on social media, and soon I had regular customers from across the country. My small apartment turned into a workshop, with shelves full of supplies and a dedicated shipping station in what should have been my dining room. After 3 years of careful financial planning, working overtime shifts, and reinvesting almost every penny of profit, I finally had enough savings to open my own physical store. The space I found was perfect, a former boutique in a busy shopping district with large windows and exposed brick walls. I signed the lease 2 months ago and spent every spare moment planning the store layout, designing displays, and organizing a grand opening celebration. This was supposed to be my moment to shine, to show everyone that the kid who spent his birthdays in the corner had built something substantial. I even hired a local photographer to document the whole event. When I told my parents about the store opening, their reaction followed a familiar pattern. They seemed excited for about 5 minutes before my mom mentioned that Emma was finishing college around the same time. Before I could even finish describing my plans for the opening party, they were already suggesting we combine it with Emma's graduation celebration. Think about it, we can invite everyone once instead of making them come to 2 separate events, my mom said, while my dad nodded along as if this was the most reasonable suggestion in the world. They didn't even seem to notice the irony of once again trying to merge my milestone with Emma's. I refused immediately, explaining that I wanted this celebration to focus on my achievement. My parents looked shocked at my resistance, like they couldn't understand why I wouldn't want to share this moment too. They kept pushing, saying I was being difficult and selfish, using their familiar guilt tactics about making things easier for everyone. The same phrases they'd used throughout my childhood came back. It's just one day and why can't you be more understanding? This time was different though. I'd spent years building this business by myself, staying up late to fill orders, dealing with difficult customers, and learning everything about running a company through trial and error. I stood my ground and told them directly that this event would be about my store launch only. Their attempts to make me feel guilty didn't work anymore. When they realized I wasn't backing down, My parents got upset and suggested they might not come to the opening at all. For the first time in my life, I told them that was their choice to make. The whole situation left me feeling frustrated and confused. Here I was, their son, achieving something significant entirely through my own efforts, and instead of being proud and supportive, they were trying to dilute my accomplishment by making it about Emma again. Even as an adult with my own business, they couldn't see me as deserving of my own celebration. The same patterns from my childhood were playing out again, but this time I wasn't a 6-year-old who could be convinced to share his special day. I decided that my store opening would be my moment alone, regardless of who showed up to celebrate it. Update 1. After sharing my frustration online, I received hundreds of responses, but one comment really stuck with me. A person pointed out that my parents had unknowingly handed me the perfect opportunity to take revenge. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. My store launch would naturally overshadow a college graduation, especially when I could offer everyone exclusive discounts and first access to my products. People are always more interested in something that benefits them directly. Instead of continuing to fight against the combined celebration, I sent my parents a message agreeing to their plan. I told them I'd reconsidered and thought they were right about bringing everyone together for one big celebration. My parents were thrilled with my apparent change of heart, probably thinking they'd won me over with their guilt trips again. I maintained this cooperative attitude during all the planning meetings, nodding along as they discussed decoration themes and menu options. My parents took complete control of the party planning, just as I expected they would. They contacted all our relatives and family friends, organized the catering, and booked an expensive venue, all centered around Emma's graduation theme. Every decision was made according to Emma's preferences, from the color scheme to the type of music that would be played. The invitation cards they sent out were the final confirmation that I'd made the right decision. They designed these fancy gold bordered cards with celebrating Emma's graduation in large, elegant letters across the top. My store announcement wasn't mentioned anywhere, not even in the small print at the bottom. My parents probably thought this would upset me, but it actually worked perfectly for my plans. Their complete focus on Emma's achievement meant that my announcement would come as a total surprise to everyone attending. I spent these weeks quietly preparing my own materials and finalizing the details of my store launch. The party venue was exactly what you'd expect from my parents. They'd invited practically everyone. The timing for my announcement couldn't have been more perfect, right after all the speeches but before the cake cutting. I caught the bartender's eye and he handed me a fresh glass of champagne. Everyone's attention turned to me as I stood up, probably expecting another tribute to Emma. I had prepared my promotional materials earlier, working with the venue staff while my parents were busy greeting guests. My announcement was pretty short and I didn't need flowery language or emotional appeals. I simply stated that after years of building my online business, I was opening my first physical store next month. Within minutes, groups formed around me as people asked about the store location, the products I'd be carrying, and the special discounts I'd be offering to family and friends. My aunt, who had just finished giving a speech about Emma's academic achievements, was now showing everyone pictures of my products on her phone. The contrast between my parents' public and private reactions was striking throughout the evening. In front of guests, they maintained their usual perfect image, forcing smiles and nodding along as relatives congratulated me. But I could read the tension in their body language, my mom's hands shaking slightly as she served cake, my dad's jaw clenching every time someone mentioned my store. Emma vanished from her own graduation party right after her champagne toast fell flat, with barely anyone paying attention to her practice speech about her amazing college journey. Once the last relative drove away and the catering staff began cleaning up, my mom finally let her facade crack. She cornered me. The same woman who had spent years teaching me to share the spotlight was now accusing me of ruining her precious daughter's graduation celebration. I explained my position calmly, pointing out that this joint celebration was their idea, not mine, and that I had simply made an announcement about my business as planned. My father's reaction revealed just how deeply their favoritism ran. Instead of acknowledging their years of unequal treatment, he immediately jumped to accusing me of jealousy. This was the same pattern I'd experienced since childhood. Any attempt to claim space for myself was labeled as jealousy or selfishness. I finally said what I'd been holding back for 20 years. I laid out every birthday, every celebration, every moment that had been hijacked and transformed into Emma's special time. For once, I wasn't asking for understanding or approval, I was simply stating facts about their pattern of behavior. My parents fell back on their usual defense strategy, recycling the same excuses they'd used throughout our childhood. Once again, they brought up Emma's abandonment, her difficult start in life, and how she needed extra support because she didn't know her biological family. These were the same justifications I'd heard at every birthday, every school event, and every family gathering where my needs had been pushed aside. But this time, their words didn't make me feel guilty. I'd spent years processing these feelings with my therapist, understanding that their behavior wasn't about Emma's needs, it was about their need to be seen as saviors. What none of us realized was that Emma had returned to the venue and was standing in the doorway during our confrontation. She burst into the room, mascara running down her face, putting on the emotional display that had always worked so well in the past. Her accusations, claiming that I had always hated her, that I was jealous of her place in the family. The reality was that I'd spent my childhood trying to be the perfect big brother, giving up my space and my celebrations while being told it was never enough. Now she was acting like she'd been the victim of my resentment rather than the beneficiary of our parents' constant favoritism. The days following the party showed just how deeply entrenched my parents' favoritism was. Instead of acknowledging how their actions had contributed to the situation, they focused entirely on Emma's hurt feelings. They called me repeatedly, demanding not just an apology, but suggesting I should finance a vacation for Emma to help her recover from the stress. The absurdity of their request was stunning. They wanted me to spend thousands of dollars to compensate Emma because people had shown genuine interest in my business achievement instead of her graduation. Their solution to Emma feeling overshadowed at one party was to demand I hand over my hard-earned money to fund her holiday. My response to their demands was simple: I walked away. After years of trying to be understanding and accommodating, I was done playing their game. My parents seemed shocked that I wouldn't immediately give in and apologize like I had so many times before. Emma's tears had always been their trump card, but this time they weren't working. The fact that they couldn't see the hypocrisy, Emma being upset about sharing attention at one party while I'd been forced to share or give up the spotlight at every celebration for 20 years, showed me nothing would ever change. This wasn't the first time I'd tried to address these issues with my family. Throughout my late teens and early 20s, I attempted multiple conversations with my parents about their favoritism. I chose different approaches, trying to have calm discussions during family dinners, writing them lengthy emails explaining my feelings, even suggesting family therapy. Each attempt was met with the same response: Emma had a difficult start in life. This phrase became their universal excuse, a way to dismiss any pain or frustration I expressed. During one particularly difficult conversation when I was 19, I broke down crying while describing how lonely I felt at my own birthday parties, and my mom's only response was to remind me about Emma's abandonment. After years of this pattern, I finally accepted that my parents were incapable of seeing their behavior clearly. I moved out of their house at 21, using the initial profits from my online business to rent a small apartment across town. Since then, our relationship has become increasingly superficial. We exchange birthday messages, share major life updates, and occasionally see each other at family gatherings. But there's no real connection anymore, no deep conversations or emotional sharing. They still don't understand why I've distanced myself, still blame me for not being more accommodating to Emma's needs, but I've stopped expecting them to change or to see things from my perspective. Update 2. Just when I thought my parents had reached their limit with the graduation party drama, they managed to surprise me with an even more outrageous demand. Before my store's grand opening, they showed up at my apartment unannounced. At first, they acted casual, asking about the store preparations while sitting awkwardly on my couch. But then they told me their real reason for visiting: they wanted me to hire Emma as the store manager. Their justification was that since she had a college degree, she shouldn't have to go through normal job hunting like everyone else. They seemed to think that my years of hard work building this business meant I was obligated to provide Emma with a ready-made career. The conversation quickly became surreal as my parents listed Emma's qualifications for managing my store. According to my dad, her main credentials were that she was smart, had a generic business degree, and was pretty, as if physical appearance had anything to do with running a retail business. I had spent years learning about inventory management, customer service, and business operations, but apparently Emma's good looks trumped all that experience. When I sarcastically asked if there was anything else they wanted me to do for their precious daughter, my mom didn't miss a beat before suggesting that Emma should also be the one to cut the ribbon at the store opening. Her reasoning? It would make up for Emma feeling overshadowed at her graduation party. They wanted me to hand over a management position in my business to someone with zero retail experience and let her be the face of my store opening, all because they thought Emma deserved another moment in the spotlight. But this wasn't about sharing toys or birthday parties anymore. This was my livelihood, my professional achievement, something I had built from scratch without any help from them. Their reaction to my refusal followed the familiar pattern of emotional manipulation they'd used throughout my life. First came the guilt trips, then the accusations of selfishness, and finally the threats. My mom delivered their ultimatum with the same certainty she'd used when forcing me to share my birthdays: either I gave Emma what she wanted, or they wouldn't attend the store opening. The smug look on Emma's face as they made this threat told me she expected me to give in like I always had before. Instead, I did something that shocked them all. I accepted their terms and told them not to come at all. The store opening exceeded all my expectations, even without my immediate family there. The space was packed with supportive friends, loyal customers from my online business. My extended family showed up in force. When relatives awkwardly asked about my parents' absence, I told them the truth without embarrassment or apology. Some offered sympathetic words while others seemed uncomfortable, but I was past caring about managing other people's feelings about my family situation. Months have passed since the opening, and my store is thriving. My parents tried their usual silent treatment, expecting me to come apologizing like I had so many times before. But their silence has become peaceful rather than painful. I no longer feel the need to make myself smaller to accommodate their vision of the perfect family.